So I was at a fast food restaurant over the weekend and I made a simple request. I ordered a side of large French fries without salt. It wasn't anything outrageous. It wasn't anything mind-boggling. I just don't like the fact that they add a pound of salt to my French fries. But then the person at the front register looked at me like I had insulted his mother. Has nobody ever asked for an order of French fries without salt? Am I the only malfunctioning humanoid out here that is ordering French fries without salt? Like, has nobody ever asked for that ever? I'm so confused. I don't know what's going on with humanity. Anyways, enough of this brutal nonsense. Let's get straight into today's video. And I would say this isn't technically like new content. It's just something that I wanted to follow up on because I found this really intriguing. Now, McFarlane has been launching a lot of crowdfunded projects, a lot of Kickstarter campaigns. And look, I've talked about this incessantly. I think it's a really bad look for a multi-million-dollar company to be going out of their way to make the consumer purchase something outright instead of paying for something once it's in their hands, or at least once it's being shipped out to them. It's not something that multi-million-dollar companies used to do back in the day. This just wouldn't happen, right? You would just purchase something, you would take it home, and you would enjoy it. You wouldn't purchase something or give money up front for something that you were going to receive in a year. That just wasn't a common theme. However, over the past few years, we've not only seen McFarlane do it, but also Hasbro and a ton of other manufacturers. I think Super 7 has done it, Mattel, so on and so forth. And I guess the excuse in most cases is that this wouldn't sell very well at retail and they would have trouble finding a lot of retailers that would be willing to carry some of these collectibles, not just because they don't have a huge fan base, but in other cases, they're just really big and expensive. Walmart or Target or Amazon, whoever was going to purchase these and resell them directly from the manufacturer would probably have to fork over quite a bit of money, and that just doesn't make a lot of sense to them. They usually like purchasing collectibles for single-digit numbers like $8, $7, $9, and then reselling them for about 2 to 3 times that amount. So that's usually how they function. And so in most cases, that's the excuse that these manufacturers use. But regardless, that's not what we're here to talk about. I just wanted to point out that that has been on the rise recently. I actually wanted to talk about the new Harley Quinn DC Multiverse Kickstarter that McFarlane actually launched, I would say like a couple of weeks ago. I do have a video where I break down the tiers, I break down the accessories, the action figures that are being included, and I give them credit. I think this is a phenomenal campaign. If you guys are interested in supporting this, I highly suggest you guys do it because I do believe that there's a ton of value here. I hate the fact that you're having to pay for shipping out of your own pocket, but that aside, you in some of these tiers, you're getting a ton of value, a ton of extras, face plates, accessories, figures that have never been released. The chances of any of these being released in the foreseeable future, I think, are extremely slim just because he is about to lose the DC license. I could see him maybe cash in and reissue some of these, but like in variations. You're not going to get the exact same figure, and you may not get the extras like the face plates and things of that nature. So it is definitely worth pointing out. However, as of the moment of this recording, which is about a week out or a little bit over a week, I should clarify, by the time I upload this, the project might have been fully funded. I don't know. And actually, at the moment of me recording this and then taking the screenshot, the numbers might have changed, but I think we were about 80% funded for this project, which I'm going to just assume that it probably will get fully funded. The number was actually pretty accessible, and I do believe that there is enough demand for this collectible to go through. But the most intriguing part about this is how successful McFarlane has been recently with a lot of his Kickstarter campaigns or his crowdfunded campaigns. Some of these he runs directly through his website. Others he goes directly to Kickstarter. I guess it just depends on what he feels has the foundation to be able to fully fund. And maybe some of it is easier to run through his website if he has a lot of confidence, and then if he doesn't, maybe he runs it through Kickstarter. I'm not 100% sure what the difference is or how things work out. Maybe he feels that people will have more peace of mind if he runs it through Kickstarter because they have more safety protocols in place and things of that nature. And I think it's a little bit easier to get refunds through Kickstarter than like it would be if he ran the campaign directly through the McFarlane website. However, as I mentioned, the success rate that he's releasing these at is just groundbreaking. I mean, we've seen Hasbro release a few Kickstarters in the past that have completely failed. We saw the Rancor, we saw the Riva lightsaber, and a few other projects that have not been fully funded or were barely fully funded. There was the Engine of Vengeance that also failed. And then, if I'm not mistaken, there were some rumors out there that the Giant Man figure was actually not fully funded. They were able to get some sales from overseas, or they added some sales that usually don't count towards the full amount. So they were barely able to fund that. But McFarlane has been on an absolute roll. He did the medieval spawn not too long ago. That one had a bunch of different tiers, a bunch of different accessories, weapons, different features that were going to be included if they hit certain milestones. And that fully funded, he had absolutely no problem with it. There was also the classic medieval spawn, which also came with like a crazy amount of detail, amazing sculpt work all around, a plethora of different accessories, and he gave you different options when it came down to the color scheme. For each individual collectible, there were variations of the exact same figure, and the list goes on and on. I mean, this is going to be fully funded, I'm going to assume. There was also that Justice League wave, the black and white Justice League wave that he did a while, this was maybe a few months ago, that also fully funded. But this is a very interesting situation because now I think it opens the possibilities to him continuing more of these projects into the foreseeable future. Now, what's interesting here is he hasn't really done larger collectibles, which is usually what Hasbro and Mattel and Super 7, that's what they usually do. That's what they reserve crowdfunded or Kickstarter campaigns for. It's usually a really big collectible that's just too much of a hassle at retail. But McFarlane hasn't done that. Yes, he does include vehicles, but in most cases, they're just regular action figures. Like here, you're looking at Harley Quinn. She does come with extras and things of that nature, but it's stuff that could be sold at retail. We just don't know why it's being offered as a crowdfunded project. Same thing with the Justice League universe, the Spawn action figures. All of that could have been carried at retail. They could have been sold at like the electronics section at Target or Walmart. It just makes absolutely no sense for him to actually release these as a crowdfunded project. But because he's being so successful, because these are flying off the shelves, and in some cases like the Spawn action figures, I think easily hit over $1 million in funding within like a couple of weeks or something like that, it opens the door to a plethora of different options here. Now, could we potentially see like Wonder Woman's invisible jet from McFarlane, which I don't even know how that would work. Would it just be clear plastic or translucent plastic? I don't know, but it would be something kind of out of the ordinary, something really cool to get in action figure form. What about the Bug, which is the main form of transportation for the Blue Beetle? This actually was featured in the new Superpowers line from McFarlane. It was kind of like a very small vehicle that was meant for his Superpowers line, which can fit the small little 4-inch action figures that are basically semi-articulated. The collectibles are closer to what you would expect from a children's line rather than like a full-fledged collector's line. However, it would be pretty interesting to see a larger scale vehicle, perhaps one that can actually fit a 7-inch DC Multiverse action figure. There's also the Javelin, which was a vehicle that was heavily featured on Justice League, the animated series. I can't quite remember if it was ever featured or how predominantly it was featured in the comic books, but I do remember it being kind of a big thing in the animated series. Now, I completely get the logistics behind most of these vehicles. Probably wouldn't make them feasible, but maybe a smaller scale or a smaller rendition of those vehicles where you could at least fit a couple of 7-inch DC Multiverse action figures in there. And I know we technically have already received, for example, a Doomsday action figure, but could we potentially see something that's like an upgrade over the previous version, maybe slightly bigger, a little bit beefier, more sculpted detail, better paint apps, maybe a base that it can be displayed on? We could also receive an upgraded Darkseid Darkseid. I just mentioned in a previous video that we've already received a couple of renditions of Darkseid. However, neither one of those are like prototypical visions, at least most people's prototypical vision of Darkseid. We did receive the Build-A-Figure Superpowers color palette version, and then there was one that was based on a video game from the Sega Genesis universe. However, as I mentioned, both of those kind of skewed from what we usually consider to be like the end-all version or the end-all look for Darkseid. So maybe there's a potential Darkseid coming down the line with, you know, just extra deluxe features, maybe extra face plates, some swappable hands, or just swappable head sculpts altogether. We also have already received a Brainiac, however, not really like a classic version of Brainiac. Maybe we could get one with like a really intricate display base. We often see Brainiac like hooked up to like a giant motherboard or a giant screen, just wires and cables attached all over him. Maybe we could see something along those lines. I just feel like the possibilities are endless when it comes down to what McFarlane can do in terms of Kickstarter campaigns or crowd-funded projects. We could also see a comic book version of Steppenwolf. We did get the live-action Snyderverse version, but it would be nice to see a comic book accurate representation as well. All in all, as I've been saying, this is a complete game changer. The fact that his crowdfunded projects are being funded so quickly and his success rate is just so high, I feel like he can really throw anything at the wall right now and it just automatically finds enough support to be fully funded. It's kind of interesting, but at the same time, I think other manufacturers need to copy and paste what McFarlane is doing. I'm not sure exactly what the formula is, but whatever he's doing, he needs to continue doing that. And as I mentioned, other companies can kind of fall in line. Honestly, it just feels like he's giving the consumer exactly what they want. I mean, people have been clamoring for this version of Harley Quinn for quite some time. People consider Margot Robbie to be like the prototypical vision of Harley Quinn in a live action movie adaptation. So he's consistently given people that. People were in love with the Snyderverse for many years, and still to this day, there are quite a few people that would love to see the Snyderverse come back, and he decided to give those people an entire crowdfunded wave. And then the Spawn universe, which has also been incredibly successful. I just feel like he's kind of figured things out when it comes down to these projects, and honestly, it's kind of exciting because it makes you think that in the foreseeable future he could be doing more deluxe features, more deluxe figures. I mean, the stuff at retail is great, but usually there you're not getting a ton of value. It's just like a $25 figure with absolutely no accessories, or sometimes you're paying a little bit of a markup with the collector's edition line. However, even there, we're starting to see them kind of skimp out on accessories. Sometimes they don't even come with extra accessory plates or face plates, extra face plates. Sometimes it just comes with like maybe 6 hands total and like a couple of accessories. We just saw a perfect example of that with the new Michael Keaton Batman Returns wave, where all of the characters or all of the figures that were featured in that particular wave came with absolutely no accessories, and they were being shopped around at that $34.99 price point. So it's definitely kind of going in the wrong direction. But when it comes down to his Kickstarter campaigns and his crowdfunded projects, he usually does a really good job of adding value. You know, if you're willing to support a project like that, if you're willing to take the risk along with him, he is always willing to reward you. And I think that at the bare minimum, even though I've criticized a lot of these projects, whether it's just from McFarlane or Hasbro or Mattel or whatever manufacturer is working on them, I feel like they can usually front those projects themselves. They don't necessarily need the fans to pay for anything up front. That aside, I actually feel like McFarlane, for the most part, like 99.9% of the time, actually gives you value. Like, you're receiving your money's worth every time you back one of his projects, which I don't always feel like is the case with a lot of these other manufacturers. Hasbro is a perfect example. The project always just feels slightly overpriced, and you're usually not getting enough in return for the amount of money that you're spending. So as I said, this is just my personal opinion, my personal take. I could, you know, make an entire list of vehicles and different characters that we haven't received yet in action action figure form, but I'll let you guys kind of add to the list down below. Let me know what kind of crowdfunded project you guys would like to see from McFarlane next. I'm very curious to see what everybody has to say, but as I mentioned, what he's doing right now, the formula that he's come up with is almost foolproof at this point, but it's just very interesting. Moving forward, we'll see how things play out. As always, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Make sure to stay tuned. We upload action figure content on a daily basis, and hopefully you guys are enjoying it just as much. Stay safe out there, enjoy the hobby, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.